Okay. So that's in the right place. I thought something was off. Didn't know where my microphone was. Just out of reach. Okay. So I am going to be working in Illustrator tonight. And we're going to see how this goes. This is a little bit off what I normally do. I'm going to give this a shot. It's similar to what I do, but at the exact same time a little bit different. So let me explain. Normally I'll come up with an idea and I start building it in Illustrator directly. Like I'll just start filling in background colors and working on flat overall designs and shapes, and then I bring that into Photoshop, which will be the ending or the next video even after this one that shows me kind of building this up. What I'm hoping is I don't completely mess this up and it's something halfway respectable when it's done. Yeah, we're gonna go with that. So hopefully the microphone is nice and loud. I noticed that in the last video I did that it wasn't as loud as I thought it was gonna be. So what we're gonna do here is use the pencil tool. Now there's a lot of background elements back in here that I'm gonna mess with some different things on. I'm gonna get rid of some of these tables, and I am going to make a couple of extra layers just ahead of time so I can kind of switch back and forth between them. And what I'm going to do first is, I'm going to see here. Okay, so just to explain what this is, if you guys have never worked in Illustrator or anything else like that, if you've never touched it, so I can turn off these layers here, and I just have this one layer. Okay, this is the PSD file. It's flattened and then brought in as a rasterized image into Illustrator that I can essentially just go back over and trace. And trace is such a dirty word, but it's really not. Yeah, people sometimes say that, and then they go, I need to wash my mouth out with humility. And there's no reason to, because if it's my own artwork and I'm tracing back over it, I'm simply saving myself time. If you're tracing over other work, then that's fine as long as you're not passing it off as your own and you're practicing. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, let me see. I think the easiest thing to do would be to start with the top layer up here, and I'm gonna go ahead and save just to make sure. And I use the pencil tool. I know there's people out there that really like to use the pen tool, but I really like to use the pencil tool, and it gives me kind of a wild little kind of scratchiness to my artwork. But what I end up doing is picking a color that I feel is going to be representative of whatever elements I'm working on, and it's easy to see. So right now all I'm doing is just the general shape of it, so it's not going to be exactly like my drawing. I haven't really found a way, aside from like meticulously going back in and rebuilding every element of this thing, but with a pen tool and reshaping the heck out of it. The truth is that if this was a pen and ink drawing that I had done for the sole reason of just inking it in, I'd probably not have any problems with it, traditionally, because it would exist and I could just trace back over my pencils and build upon them. But working digitally is sometimes a struggle for me, because I want to be able to capture the exact sort of movement and these little delineations in the line quality and stuff. And sometimes I end up blowing it out a little bit more. Like you're noticing here, I'm not exactly copying it dead on, and that's okay. That's not a real big deal. Now what I'm doing here is this is just an overlay, and this will make more sense as I go along. Hopefully it does. Hopefully I'm not just gonna eat it here on this. Yeah, this has been one of the reasons why I get real nervous going live, because it has even more to do beyond like working on something and saying, oh well, this is how I do this particular bit of art creation. I don't even think it's about like anybody necessarily criticizing me. Hello, Luna. I don't think it's anything like that. I think it's more along the line of, I feel like, am I gonna get it to look like I want it to at the end? And there's always this weird fear I have of like, oh, it's not gonna look good, and people are gonna realize that I'm just a hack. Which is such a horribly bad way to look at it, right? Like, it shouldn't be that way, but it is how I end up looking at things. And I've talked about this before. Yes, it's imposter. I almost said Inspector Gadget. I don't know why I did. Yes, it's Inspector Gadget. No, it's imposter syndrome, and I know plenty of people that deal with it. professionals, amateurs, people starting out, people who've been in the industry for a long time, and it just haunts you. You know, you feel like, well, I'm trying my best, I'm doing everything I can. So then after I do this, I select everything here, and all of these are different shapes that are overlapping. What you're seeing is the blue edges are the blue because that's the color that the layer was assigned. So if I click up here on the layer, there's the blue. See right there, the blue. And so I'm just going to go in here to my Pathfinder tool. I'm going to merge them all into one big shape. So if I move it, then it all stays together. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to save. And let me see here. Woo, 5 minutes in, and so far no screw-ups. All right, I'm going to go over here and do this one. Still staying on the same layer. And I'm going to start out here and start building these shapes out. So some of these shapes are very much inspired by the Dark Crystal and Panzer Dragoon. I don't know if you guys have ever played that game, but Panzer Dragoon, not Dragoon, is the bee's knees. It is an amazing game. That was the first long-form RPG that I lost my mind over. I had played other RPGs prior to that, Phantasy Star, Lunar, wonderful ones like that, Albert Odyssey, mainly Sega ones, and but that one was the penultimate one. I recently found out about a Patreon that is attempting to do, I don't know if it's like a tech demo or an example of possibly bringing that game back to fruition. And the reason for that is because evidently Sega can release the other two games in the series, the original Panzer Dragoon, and then the follow-up to it, the sequel, number 2, or Zui, or whatever. And I never did learn how to pronounce that name right. But they are going to make follow-ups to that stuff. And my pillow fell down. And so they've been releasing that for years, but for some reason, conspicuously absent from those releases was any iteration, any version of Saga, which on the original Saturn took up 4 CD-ROMs to be put on. And I ordered mine through the Sega hotline, 1-800-USA-SEGA, I believe it was. And I remember being all excited and talking to the person on the line and going, I can't believe this, I can't believe this. I used my mom's credit card because I was not old enough to have a credit card. I placed that order, and the rest is history. I got the game, and I played it, and I fell head over heels in love with it. I still have my original copy, only slightly tarnished by the fact that I lent it to an individual who thought that the instruction manual could be a drink coaster. And so I don't lend out games anymore to anyone, ever. And I did finish the game. It was one of those games where, well, I won't ruin it. I won't ruin it. It was excellent. It only suffered from the fact that it was probably, just like Shenmue, way ahead of its time and a product of its time. So there was these circumstances where, even as much as I really wanted to enjoy what the game was, and I did, there was always these things of like, oh, I can see where the limitations of this were really pushing what the Saturn was capable of doing. Now, there was, speaking of Shenmue, there was Project Berkeley, which was released on the Dreamcast. And that one was one where it originally was aimed for a Sega Saturn release under the codename Project Berkeley. And you can actually go out on YouTube and see some footage of it. I've covered this before in a playthrough that I did for Shenmue. And if you have the Xbox version, I believe the demo's on there as well, too. So, at any rate, the whole thing was that there was, this whole thing in my head of like, well, why hasn't that game been released? Well, evidently, at some point in time when Sega was reorganizing, they lost the code. So I don't know if the hard drive it was on went cuckoo or what happened or anything else like that. I just know they don't have it anymore. And they've gone on record saying, we just don't have that game. We lost it. That's pretty horrifying. That's pretty darn terrifying on a lot of levels. And I freak out when I lose a video because of a hard drive crash. I can't imagine losing a legacy game like that was as profound as it was. That's pretty darn disappointing. You just kind of look at it and go, oh God, why did this happen? And Yeah, I couldn't get over that. I was like, that's ridiculous. So, but that was one of the games that the design of the characters, of the world, of all that stuff was just mind-blowingly good, and it transported me when I'd played it. It just took me to a whole nother place, like any good fantasy does, you know. But that one I think was really special because it was something it even affected a lot of the painting style when I still was painting opaque, that I was doing in this abstract sort of form. It was like proto-abstract. I wouldn't even say I was really serious about the abstract art I was doing. I just liked it because, well, it was fun, and I was still saying something with my art. And a lot of it from the armor designs that were on the dragons and stuff in the game is where I drew inspiration, and then it manifested in the paintings I was doing at the time. So a lot of them were like this bone segmented, kind of like drawn out animal hide skin sort of thing. It was the look of it, as opposed to it really being representative of those particular design elements. So that's where this stuff came from. And I've always been fascinated with floating islands. I think they end up manifesting heights and islands, which are two things I'm terrified of. Islands because you're out in the middle of the ocean, you know, or somewhere like that. You're just isolated, and you really have to think about, like, oh, holy crap. Like, I have no desire to ever want to go to Hawaii. I do and I don't. A part of me wants to see it just because I've heard it's beautiful. I've known people from there and who've gone there and said, man, it's amazing. But, you know, being able to drive around, I think the main island in like an hour and a half or something like that, I think less than that, just kind of reminds me how tiny that is. I'm like, wow, that isn't that big, and a good sized tsunami would wipe that thing out. I don't know. It's hard for me to put my head around that. Okay, so now we got the basic shapes of these little floating things. I am going to go in here now, and I am going to lock down the first one, but I'm going to turn it off. Now I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to do the mountain range. Again, I'm just doing a basic shape, and there's a reason for this, and I'll kind of talk about it more whenever I bring this back into Photoshop. I want to make sure I have the right one selected. I want to go ahead and save again. And let me see here. All right, so this is going to be a mountain range back here in the back. Now I'm going to fill in some of the detail, even though it isn't anything we would be seeing normally. And all of this gets edited again once it's in Photoshop for its own reasons. That being, I may just want to change it. Then I'm coming down with it here, and over this way, and down here. I went too far. Okay, so then that one is going to be, we'll just make it a blue. That's not blue. I have this tungsten colored light spilling over, and it's making color correction be a nightmare. The good thing is I don't have to necessarily worry about accurate colors right now, and I should be using, I've got OBS playing on this upper screen where there's no glare. I should be using that for some color study, but that's okay. Okay, so that's the mountains there. And now what I'm going to want to do is, I'm not going to fill in the background with any particular color, but what I am going to do is unlock this and hit save. I'm going to go to this layer here. Now on this one, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Because there's a few things that I can do in Photoshop. I could go ahead and put a circular vector in here and then bring it into Photoshop. I can also just create that in Photoshop. What this was for was to get the designs in here that really need more of a they need more of this pen or pencil tool sort of effect given to them. And so with this one, since it's going to be kind of a smoke color, I'm going to do it gray for now. And it's not going to stay this color, but this allows me to kind of come in here and play with this. And again, I'm just using a real rough go at it. It's not going to match the shape exactly, and that's okay. But this is a sort of design element that I bring through a lot of my work really often. And then I'm going to do one more down here. just to kind of go over this one. And again, it doesn't have to match perfectly. In fact, I don't really want it to, but well, I lie on that because there are times whenever I draw something, I'm like, oh, I want that to be exactly as how I had it. But then, you know, through happy hapstance and other stuff, I end up going back and it looks differently in a different way. Okay, so now this is the super simple part, okay? This is all I need. I've drawn out the most important elements that are not that I don't want to draw out in Photoshop, and they look real wonky right now. These are not the final colors, not by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, in fact, the cities, or I'm calling them cities, but these little floating island things are going to be darker, and then I'm going to figure out the overall color based on what I decide to start laying out in Photoshop. A lot of times I will use complementary analogous palettes that will work together, but sometimes I like to just kind of play around with it and get it a little more jarring since it is alien. And but I end up relinquishing that a lot of times and going right back to something far more traditional or even local color-esque in how I execute it. Sometimes my pieces end up being very monotone as well too, or you know, duotone. So there's two particular colors that'll come together that may not necessarily complement or be analogous with one another. So this is the first step. Again, just building up these things. So now I'm going to go ahead and switch this over, and what I'm going to go ahead and do is just take these elements and put them into Photoshop. But because I've had problems before switching between apps on the computer, not because of my system, thank goodness, but because I just upgraded to the new versions of Photoshop and Illustrator, and I know OBS just got a brand new update that I installed. I'm nervous about it just crashing and killing this, so I'm going to stop recording this right now and quickly switch this out and then come back with Photoshop activated. Okay, so we're back now, and I'm in Photoshop, and you'll notice over here on the side, right here, I've got 3 layers that are non-rasterized. They're still in as vector smart objects, which means I brought them over from Illustrator, dropped them in there. This is more explanation for people that don't know about this sort of stuff, and dropped them in there so they're still resizable, but I'm going to rasterize them out here in a bit and start working with the actual elements as I have them in there. But before I do any and all of that, the first thing I thought about doing was, well, I have a background here. I wanted to make some sort of a decision as to what the sky was going to look like, and tonight I was really feeling like working with, you know, some sort of color like purple or something. I'm not really sure. So I'm going to go here into my swatches and just pull up something. I tend to work with my default swatches quite a bit in Photoshop and messing around with like what's in the background. So now that I have this line work here, it's transparent except for the line work. So what I'm going to do, and I'll show you what I mean by that, I'm going to pick, let's try this. So all I do is I'm working on the background color, and I just dump this in there like that. So I'm starting to get an idea, and that's pretty close to the color I wanted. It's sort of a midnightish blue color. And let me go ahead and save this. Okay, so got that saved, and the first thing I'm going to do, swear to goodness, so I I have, just to give you an explanation as to sometimes why I take a little bit of a hesitation, there's a glare that goes right across my Cintiq, and it's from the studio light over here on this side. Eventually this is getting replaced with a much better one, so I won't look like I'm going blind all the time, because whenever I step into the light, it's extremely bright on me, but then I have to really lean into the artwork like I'm going to do right now. So what I end up doing is I build everything in a crazy amount of layers. And I zoom out just a little bit, so that way I'm not all up on this. And what I'm going to do is I have some brushes that I really like working with, and one of them is the Quell Elbow, and I'll sort of since I want there to be a little bit of a diffusion and more lit toward the horizon, I'm going to come in here and just slowly start in this area here. But what I'm going to do is darken this color. So I'm going to go to my selection and add a little more darkness in there like this. Since this is layered, it's just going to start slowly flowing in like so. And I usually have to be careful about this because when I'm working in higher resolution, which I believe this is a higher resolution, I should check that before I really get started. Let me look at that right yeah, it's decent. 3600 pixels by 3600 pixels by 300 resolution. More than good. And I'm just going to keep layering over on top to darken this up a little bit. What I'm doing is I'm just adding in, didn't mean to do that. Added a new color fill on accident. I'm just going to darken all this up here for later usage. And at some point, all of this digital ink work I did goes away. There's no reason for it to stay in there at all. Now, the nice thing about this is that the harder I push on this, the darker it's going to get up there. All right. And now I'm going to, so I got that darker color going up there. I'm going to go even a little bit darker. So I'm going to put that same color I had and go even darker just for a little bit more contrast up here. You'll notice that the brush changes consistently. It's one of the things I do like about Brushbox and the settings that I have in there. Brushbox, this is an add-on. You can go look for it online. I can't remember the guy that makes it, but it's invaluable. It's one of the things that helps me out. Photoshop, picking and making my own brushes and grabbing the ones I want and allocating them and grouping them by colors. It's amazing. All right, let me go ahead and save this. Now, if I were to take away the blue and black line work, it looks like this. Just this nice gradiated area that's kind of textured up. So now I am going to take a look here and see what I got to work with. Okay, so what I will probably end up doing first is, since I've got this layer here that has the cloud area on top of it, I'm going to go ahead and merge that down. I'm pretty happy with that. And a lot of times I do this just to save on memory and performance, because, and I don't know why, I don't know if it's just that, you know, the systems seem a little more memory hungry or something. I'm not really sure why that's the case, but it seems like even right now, they're like, I can go in here, let's see, it's stuck saving, so let's see if this holds up. Every once in a while there's this hiccup in the system, and it always happens whenever I end up doing any kind of saving for these things. It always makes me a little bit, yeah, I want to save. Okay. Alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead, and now that I got that, and close that out and see that. So now what I'm going to do is, this is the shape of the mountain down here. So I bring these in for reference points more than anything, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the line work, since I only use the line work for sort of placement and understanding where the overall gradient of certain things are going to be, because the line work really doesn't play into it anymore. Now what I'm going to do is, if I were to overlap this, now here's these floating black vectors. Before I pulled them over from Illustrator, I just made sure that I had filled in all the colors with a dark color, and there's already a neat sort of ambiance and look going on here that I'm really excited about. So with this one, since I'm definitely keeping this, I'm going to go ahead and rasterize that one and save. Constantly saving. And then I'm going to close out of that, and then right here is, I'm going to wait on this one because I may or may not keep this. This may just be a reference point for some clouds that I want to go across, or a little bit of mist, haze, that sort of thing happening. And you know, I can always go and do something more with that. Now with this is more of a where what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select this, not the shape above it, and I'm going to go ahead and rasterize this just so I'm not having to mess with that extra memory. Go ahead and hit save again. Okay, now what I'm doing now is not messing with that. I'm actually going to create a new layer. Sometimes I'll use that specific layer I was on and I'll do something with it, but in this case that's not what I'm going for. I'm going to go back in here, get an even darker color, go back in with the same brush I had before, and because I've selected it this way and it's over the background, I'm going to start coming in here and filling in like this, leaving it a little bit lighter toward the bottom. And this is how I get a lot of my effects, where I can kind of get a darker sort of silhouette in the background. And I just play with this until I'm happy with it, until I really start getting the effect and the look that I want on here, you know. Let's see here. All right. Let's see here. Yes. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's see here. All right, that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we hit save. Hopefully this has been catching. So usually when I start working this intensively and then I've got OBS running, it does all kinds of weird things. So I'm hoping the video is catching what I'm doing in here. If not, I'm going to have to clean up this edit, and you'll notice that it jumps around. So the jump cuts are probably happening because of the fact that I've had to kind of work through what I've got here. And okay, so that's good. We're going to hit deselect for now. And that's pretty good. So then the next thing, so I'm placing these back over, and that's what they look like over this mountain range. Now, I like kind of how big they are, but I also kind of want to give some space to them. So this is where I end up making some decisions on what the overall size is going to be and what the scale would be on this. But since I've already rasterized them, I don't want to make that change right now. I'm going to work on detailing them. So I'm going to go in here, and because originally it had some shape and some quality to them, I just want to be able to go in and have some fun with each one of these things and kind of give them something extra. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this line drawing, because I know that I want some planets and some stuff up here, but I can always go back and reference the original if I need to, so that's going to save a little bit of space there. And then since I don't need the mountain shape anymore, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that vector shape there. So now we're just reduced down to a much simpler overall file layout. And most of the time when I'm certain what I have, I end up going in and really renaming things and rasterizing everything just so I'm saving space and time with the file. It's something that I didn't usually worry about before, but now that I've started recording a lot more, it's just easier to do performance wise for my machine and stuff like that as well too. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new layer here. And so something I do ahead of time, and this is kind of bizarre, but this is just something I do. Let's see here. Save again. I'm playing it safe because I really don't want to jack this up. All right, so let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and do an outer glow on it, okay? And then we're going to go to this. The outer glow is going to be, what would it be? It could be kind of an orangish glow. We could do something like that, you know, kind of an electric glow like that. That one might not be too bad. It's pretty high fantasy. So what I'm doing is this. So the color I'm going to choose is going to be white, okay? But now I'm going to go in here. Now I'm picking for my group brush, so I'm going to pick pin clinger, which is a real hyperfine sort of thing. And this is something everyone has a different way of doing this, but I tend to do a couple different things. Sometimes I'll draw directly onto it and I'll create my own shapes and stuff, but sometimes I find that doesn't work exactly as I want it to, so then I end up wanting to use a lasso tool and sort of drawing in my designs. And I'll show you what I mean. So like, let's say there's some designs like this. Okay, it's just designs I'm making up, and I didn't draw that in, I just drew some shapes that could work with it. And then I'm going back into my brush tool and enlarge a little bit, do that with it. Now I'm going to go here, and I didn't mean to do color effects, I meant to do outer glow. So the outer glow, okay, I go in here, and the color I want to pick is orange. So we're going to go here, and maybe it's real sharp orange. We're going to try that. And give it a little bit of a blowout like that. Let's see if this starts to work right. There's the opacity. Let's go back a little bit. Let's pull the spread back some. So it's a real nice glow. The size like this. Yeah. See, and I always end up trying to figure out what my size is going to be on this and how much of a distinct glow it's going to have. Because sometimes I like blowing out the glow quite a bit. But we're going to leave that as the default. That's kind of the first test one. I'll go ahead and hit select, deselect, and there's the first little glowing bit of imagery on there. Save. Now on that same layer, now that I've established that, and again, this is just something that I do. I don't recommend that everyone does this sort of thing, but this is just something that I enjoy and that I end up decorating all my stuff with. So maybe here, maybe this arm drops down. And it comes down like this. There's some more patterns down here. And some like this. And the reason I kind of go crazy with it is so that way I can sort of have fun as I'm filling this in there. It's like a coloring book at that point. And I allow myself to sort of have fun with it and just go like, well, how far can I push this, you know? So much of my design is just literally arbitrarily made. There's really no rhyme or reason for a lot of what I will put in these designs. I love things that glow at night. I was obsessed when I was a kid with like glowing neon lights in the rain. That to me is some of the most beautiful man-made stuff you will ever see. I'm mesmerized by it because I don't know, there's just something, maybe it's because of the movie Blade Runner, maybe it's from something, I have no idea. I have no idea where it really comes from. But it stuck with me for years and years and years. It was something that I couldn't get enough of. And so now a lot of my illustrations, in fact all of the current ones, really rely on that look. And so they end up building this sort of cool, you know, what I think is cool anyway, this sort of cool alien feel to it that it glows like it's bioluminescent, which is really something else too. Bioluminescence in nature is fascinating to me. You know, the animals and the various mushrooms that showcase it. That's wild. That's just so freaking crazy how beautiful they are. And I've always wondered, like, what would humans look like if we had that capacity? And I know there's people that get kind of close, like you'll see people that do like, you know, UV and glow in the dark tattoos and things like that. And I think that's kind of cool. You know, that's got a neat sort of thing going for it. Here, let's maybe make some sectioned stripes. Or not stripes, just sections that, oh heck, I didn't do that. No. Let me do this again. Hit shift. So I'm just holding down shift as I'm building these shapes in there. And fill this in there. It's literally, this may seem a little tedious, but this is actually really relaxing. Unless the whole thing crashes and it doesn't want to save. Yeah? Yes, ma'am. My cat Luna really wants some attention right now. Yes. Play with the paws. I know. You know, I don't know what I'll do someday, and I mean someday far in the distance when my cats aren't around. I may get new cats, but, you know, adopt new ones, but there's something to be said about being around the ones you have and the light they bring into your world during that time. They're there with you. And Luna is definitely one like that. All three of the cats one, which passed away some years ago, Zero. He was my first cat I'd had in a very long time, and had him for so long, and he never had the chance to benefit from this studio, unfortunately. He was around, I believe, when it was being built, but that was it. There wasn't a whole bunch of time for him to really be able to enjoy what was going on and have a nice spot to... He was a very solitary cat, so he lived in the basement whenever, you know, it was still kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? When it was still sort of undone, not finished. And I hated that it took me so long to get that done, to really take the time to, you know, build it out and all that other stuff. Some of it was money, some of it was time, but now I'm happy because, you know, I've got a foster upstairs that, although cat friendly, Luna in particular is not foster friendly. It's, you know, and I know that cats can act out and they can do some crazy things whenever they are put, you know, through some circumstances where they don't like, you know, what's going on in the house. And she's definitely one that does that. And there's not a lot I can do about that. I just try and roll with the punches and go, well, you know, at least you do have the studio to go to. And sometimes when it gets real late at night, I'll just opt to sleep down here, and they keep me company. You know, I've had some close calls with both of my cats. Radar is my other cat. He is much more dog friendly and foster friendly, just friendly all the way around. He's a cat that acts like a dog, and I'm grateful for that, because he's got this wild way that he is with things where nothing really phases him, although he is a very sensitive cat, and he's very loving and very human loving. He's one of those cats that he wants to be right there with you no matter what, and I sincerely appreciate that. At the same time, he also likes having his personal space, so there is that cat aspect to him. It's very cool. Luna is a big lover in the fact that she's like, be here with me. I don't care if you're touching me or not. I really want you to be here. But she also likes her isolation down here. So I can't say anything too much on that. You know, where I find that to be good or bad, either way, it just is what it is. All right, those came out much better than I'd hoped, which is really cool. Of course, now I'm getting nervous. I'm like, oh, now things are going to start falling apart on me, like just like the overall look. But that's okay. I'm going to stay positive. Stay positive, positive, positive. Positive Pete is what I'm going to be. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Actually, I'm going to start at the top. So start at the top of the other one. I'm going to do the same thing there on this one. So, and again, like this is something that I could probably do with vector shapes and get a much better result out of it. But there is something about being able to, I don't know what the word is, just make these things up as I go along that I really end up enjoying so freaking much. And sometimes, you know, like I look up, because I'll also look up at the other screen sometimes when I'm doing this in OBS, and I'll cut some stuff out, and sometimes I decide I'm going to go back in and I'm going to like leave some areas where the light doesn't go through as much and that sort of thing, just to give it like a little bit of like this sort of an alien sort of feel to it. The only flaw with this is that once I click off of it, I can never really reclaim that same shape ever again, and that can become a little bit problematic, but that's okay. It's all right. I think some of this comes from I wanted to be, you know, I had always aspired to be either a dinosaur fossil hunter or a geologist when I was a kid. Those were real big things I wanted to be. I didn't mind it. I think, though, the problem I was worried about was I grew somewhat disillusioned with it when I found out how much of it was reliant on grants and that things really don't happen like they do in Jurassic Park. Thank goodness. But because of that, it made it a little more difficult for me to want to be able to stick with those sort of jobs. Although there are times whenever I think to myself, like, is it too late in life to switch up what I want to do and try something different like that? Because I think it'd be kind of cool. I don't know. And then there's the other times when I'm like, well, if I want to do something like that, I can live vicariously through, like, maybe I'll just make a video game or a comic book character about it or something like that, and I don't know, not try and do the science thing. Science is, although I have a fascination with them, and I'll watch things like the Science Channel, I think it is, or History Channel, or anything else like that. I have a love of history, all that other stuff, but there's times whenever I think to myself like, oh yeah, not super interested because I don't want to have to deal with these things that seem more difficult. That's such a cop-out, isn't it? It shouldn't be that bad. I don't know. I get that way with my art too. I don't know if you ever feel that way. If you're trying to create something, all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to do this. I want cool things, but I don't want to do that. And it can become kind of a bear to deal with, you know. All right, so I'm gonna here, get down. I think when it comes to art and being overwhelmed by what some people are doing, the problem I have is that I see these people creating amazing works of art, right? And I think to myself, like, how long did that take? Please let that have taken them 10 years to have made or something like that, because I will often get caught off guard. I'll see where somebody did something really neat, and I'm like, oh okay, well, that's cool. I kind of wish I had done that, you know, or something along that line. And it turns out to be more where I'm just upset at myself because I didn't think about something, like I didn't put something together fast enough, or I was like, oh, that idea is fantastic. There's a guy on TikTok that was talking about this great concept, and when I heard about it, I'm like, yeah, you do you, man, that's freaking amazing. I think it's a really great idea. He had this idea for like soy-based candles that would smell like coffee, and he had me at coffee, so I was like, okay, what's your next pitch on that? And he said, well, what if it's, and he was asking everybody, not just me, but he was like, what if it smells like coffee and the mug has some cool printing on it, and then when you're done with the candle, you wash it out with the, you know, you wash out what's left of the soybean candle, and you have this collectible coffee mug that had a soybean based candle in it that was coffee smelling, and how amazing that would be. And I had to concur. I was like, that is brilliant. I think it's really good. And there were some people, because he was nervous about like doing that, but he was really cool about it, where he was like, oh, well, you know, check out this person, they do something similar with teas, and you might want to follow this other artist because they do this. And I was like, see, that's what I'm talking about. And on TikTok, it has been a revelation in a lot of ways to see what is out there. Like, just the amount of people willing to help each other and do stuff is really cool. Don't get me wrong, there's still a fair amount of blockheaded people, and that is an unfortunate thing that is happening that I have seen, and I'm like, well, you know, whatever. There's going to be that, and there's only so much you can do about it. But at the same time, I think to myself, I'm like, wow, that it's still cool to see the people that genuinely are trying to help others, and I always try, and I think I do that on most social media networks anyway. I try to, you know, leave the best remarks and comments I can for people, because, you know, I know what that's like whenever you're really excited about something and then it just doesn't hit the way that you thought it was going to hit. You know, it goes some other way. It goes 6 ways sideways a Sunday, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, whatever I made wasn't cool, or anything else like that. It's just like the most debilitating feeling in the world to have to deal with that. And then you're thinking to yourself like, man, did anything I just make even merit anything? Like, it's just, and maybe some of it is because and this isn't against TikTok, I'm just trying to figure out like what I'm doing wrong in some of these circumstances, because it feels like some videos I do really rank, and I'm trying different times of the day, I'm trying different music, I'm trying all kinds of stuff, you name it. It's ridiculous what I'm trying. All right, so let me zoom out on this. Oh yeah, I'm liking that quite a bit. Okay, so see, those are looking good. They look like they're kind of on fire, kind of glowy. That's cool. I'm really digging that. That's way better than I thought it was going to be. And but at the same time, while I have the opportunity, I'm going to go ahead and save. And while I have the opportunity, I'm going to go ahead and mess with the overall look here and just see. Okay, so it's currently at 93%. I can take this down a bit. So maybe it's not so intense. Maybe the spread is a little wider. Size a little bigger. But see, then it starts getting that opaque look that I don't want. see a little bit. It's always a weird thing to mess with this, you know? And then there are some colors that really seem to work, and then some that are just terrible. And I can't explain that. Like, I really can't. And I know that, like, when you get up past a certain size, like, the spread isn't so great, but then you want, like, maybe a wider, like, glow like that. Like, maybe you want something like that where it looks even more glowy, which is wild because you can go a little bit too crazy with it, you know what I mean? But then there's something about it really glowing out like that, and then pulling back on the opacity just a bit so it really has I'm on fire and I'm glowing kind of effect, right? But now looking at it from a distance, I'm like, okay, did I go too much with it? But that's something I can still cut back out. Not a big deal right now, but I think I really like that. So I'm gonna hit save and put it at that point. Now the ones in the background, I'm gonna do a little bit less lighting, and I will probably do it on a similar sort of thing with it still glowing. This is always where I end up making some weird decisions where I'm like, well, am I going to lock this down and then, you know, do the background a slightly bit different way? How am I going to do this? Because I'm already kind of liking where things are going. Again, I'm probably going to take the elements, isolate them, and then resize everything so that it fits the overall look that I'm going with a little bit better, because this is a little bit too front heavy, and there's some ideas I have, but I want to make sure that this is, that even if this is the center of the attention, this could evolve into something more. And I'm really liking what they're doing and what they look like, and the weird shapes in them, like their sigils almost burning out from them. I think the one on this side here has a little bit much going on in general, but it's not terrible. It's just there's some areas in here where I feel like, as I'm, especially now that I'm looking at it on this top screen, I'm like, maybe I'm going in here and I am erasing some of this out. Like, I don't know, there's like this part here, maybe this one, can kind of cut that down a bit there. Yeah, there's something there bugging me. I'm not sure what it is. I think it might be this shape there. That's a little bit better. I end up making all of these crazy decisions, like, as I'm working through this stuff. Okay. And all right, that's good. That's fine for now. I don't want to overdo it. I may end up re-pushing this through in the morning. I'm going to finish working through this a little bit right here, but I'm really liking where this is going. I'm really liking how there's just enough on these. So now I'm going to go over here to the back, and I'm going to use the same layer, and I'm going to draw in a few little bits of detail on this. So I'm going to be really careful with this, because I know that this one doesn't need as much pronounced sort of lighting coming off of it. Here, so I'll blow this one up a little bit more. Curve that one. And let's see here. Curve that one. Again, a lot of these shapes just come from some really cool things I've seen, whether it's, you know, writing like Aramaic, Arabic, calligraphic styles of all kinds. And since I know this is going to be in the background, like, maybe another thing I'm doing too is just save that. So I've got this as a solid. Maybe there's a couple of dots in here. So do that. I'm fascinated with things that glow and like this in the background. I just, again, as I was saying earlier, like, there's just something. I think it's because your mind plays tricks on you. You're trying to figure out, what exactly am I looking at? You know what I mean? And until you get a really good grasp on what you're looking at, it can look, your imagination can run with it, and it's just such a beautiful thing to let it do that. So maybe what I'm also doing now that I'm looking at this is taking the flames off the bottoms of the other ones, because Because now that I'm doing this, I'm really liking the way it looks a certain way without all of that other stuff on the bottom of the other ones. So maybe those have no glow on the bottom. Maybe it's just toward the top. In fact, I think that's really where I'm going to head with this. So I'm going to zoom back out. Yeah, that's a big thing there. Okay, I'm actually going to do this. So I'm going to save this first. Let's see here. And I'm going to take out these. If I don't like it, I can revert it. It's not a big deal. What is happening here? Oh, they're still selected. All right, so now I'm gonna I had another area selected. I'm gonna take this out. See what that looks like. I kind of like that. I kind of like that that's gone on the bottom. There's no glowing on the underneath, so that kind of gives it like a heavier sort of feel. Okay, that's working. Okay, there's something I really like about that now. Now that I'm really looking at it, I'm really liking that quite a bit. All right. So, yeah, it's almost like these spires of gold or something like that coming off of there. That's really neat. Okay, so we're going to put a few other little details back here. Not much, since this is even smaller. And, let's see here. Curve down. And then come back over. You know, I remember that most of the time whenever I draw stuff like this, I always think of, I think it's what, Picasso's Guernica. I don't even know where the comparison comes because I was never really a huge Picasso fan. I mean, I could appreciate what he created and what he did, but I didn't really have like a huge love for his work or anything else like that. I just never really did. It wasn't that I, had anything particularly against it. I just didn't understand it for a long time. I recognize his incredible capability and ability, and right around the time that happened, I really started liking other artists that were doing stuff like splatter painting and stuff like Pollock is a huge one, because I'm consistently blown away by how he got there, having been Thomas Hart Benton's student. And I mean, anyone's welcome to invent new things and do different things. I get that, but that was just such a wild stretch in my head. Like, I'm like, how did you get there? Like, that doesn't even make sense in my head, not by any stretch of the imagination. All right, so maybe this one's just got a few things there like that. Deselect and save, and I'm gonna zoom out quite a bit. All right, I am liking that quite a bit. Quite a bit I am. Sam, I am. All right, so then, because I want the glows to stay as they are, this is where I always get a little bit like, okay, how's this gonna work? Pardon me. Because so I'm gonna go ahead and create a new layer, and what I'm gonna do is select this one and I'm gonna merge it. Okay, when I merge these layers, what it does, it takes away the effect, but it keeps it. So now it's just part of it. There's no glowing layer on it. I'm gonna go ahead and name this glowing orange. And rock formation, and hit save. Now what I'm going to do now is resize this. So now when I do this, the glow will kind of stay. I'm going to use the screen up here. It's a little bit smaller to kind of get an idea as to what I'm wanting out of this. Okay. So what's really wild to me is how much I want, you know, for it to not be level. I mean, does that make sense, what I'm saying? So what I'm going to go ahead and do, although I didn't really want to do this ahead of time, you know what? I'm going to do a few things first. So I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to put a large circular shape here over the background. I'm going to do sort of a planetary sort of sphere here. I'm going to pick my favorite brush in the world. It scrolls down to it. And I'm going to pick, oh, let's go with this. All right. I'll put a brand new layer here. And what I'm going to do is just lightly start to bring it in. Okay. And then I'm really going to lighten that up. I'm going to bring it down just a bit. Overall shape. Okay. There's that. Now I'm going to reduce the opacity on that one. Bring the fill down quite a bit. And I'm going to go here into my racing tool, and I'm going to reduce the hardness but increase size, and then use my handy dandy toolbox tool to really kind of blow it out a bit. Now my opacity is sitting at 100, so I don't want it to be that high. I'm going to really reduce it and just slowly start chipping away at the form here just a bit, just to bring it in just a bit. Just a little bit of a fade on the horizon. Okay, there's that. Maybe what I'm doing is moving that shape up just a bit. It's a little bit low for me. Okay, let's save. Alright, that's looking better. I like that. So now you guys are kind of seeing where I'm going with this. And so I had another planet over on the other side, but what I can do is just on that, you know, same layer, I can do maybe a smaller shape like so over here. And we'll use the same brush. Come over. Okay, so that's looking better. I'm liking that. All right, let me see here. Okay, yeah, that's okay. That's not great, but it's not bad. So what I'm really going to do is come in here with this and really kind of start to take that down just a bit. I'm going to eat the top part of the planet up here. Just like that, just so it's barely there. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Okay, so that I'm liking that quite a bit more. All right, now this is going to be sort of kind of a guessing thing here. I can tell already that my system is starting to bug down a little bit on this. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is stop right here, and then I'm going to continue it tomorrow and see what more I can build and add on to this once I figured out where layers are going to go and that sort of thing. I'm going to sit and think on this because I'm really liking the little dots that I put up there on the top, but at the same time, like, maybe that didn't really work right. I may have messed that up by leaving those in there, and now I got to make a decision about going back in there and fixing that, or taking it out, or just leaving them as design points. since it's not something I did on the other ones, is there a reason for that? You know, like, is there any sort of real connection in there for that sort of thing? And why did I do that? So that's some of the stuff I need to take a real hard look at. So I will go ahead and finish it now, or finish the video now, and then come back with the final. Hopefully it'll be one that I can record and it won't go bad. I've already noticed there was a couple hiccups. I'm gonna have to edit out this one. So, and it just seems to happen when I start really doing some graphics heavy stuff in Photoshop now. I don't know if it's my system that's doing it. I don't think it is, but it might be the new version of Photoshop. So anyway, hope you guys are enjoying this so far. I really wanted to be able to show the process of what I end up doing when I'm creating these things. And so I've still got to add more to the background and more to the foreground down below, and then decide what overall is working in here. This is just a concept for just something. It's not anything that I'm necessarily going to turn into a full color illustration for selling, but it'll be, it may not. More than likely this is going to be just something where I'm doing it just for the overall effect and look, and then possibly using it for some other reason. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will continue here in a while with the rest of the videos. Okay, so it's tomorrow morning, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into this. So I'd given it some thought last night. I don't know if you ever spend time just thinking about where your business is going and all of this other stuff, and it really does kind of affect how you work and what you're creating and all of that sort of thing. And I did make a decision where I was going to start trying to make these videos during the day. So before I jump into this, I was just going to wax a little poetic on this. When you're doing anything like what I'm attempting to do, which is, you know, really build a solitary sort of business where you're trying to make a presence for yourself online, you have multiple things you have to do. Part of it is like recording something like this and showcasing your skill set, not only in long format, you know, sort of videos like YouTube, but also being able to truncate this, speed it up, and share it to Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. These things start to pile up, and it's really important to work on a pipeline, which is something that I want to talk about at a later point in time. I am the least organized person in so many ways, but I do adhere to certain things that I will try and remember to do. I know that I am a creature of habit, and I build patterns, and that is evident in my artwork output, from not only the subject matter to how much I do put out, to also what I, you know, want to try and, you know, attain as far as my goals. And so the biggest challenge for me a lot of times is just, you know, what does all of this really turn into in the long run? And it's a very interesting thing to juggle, because on one side I still want to have time, you know, to be able to do stuff, have down personal time, stuff away from the camera. But the more I'm trying to push my business and trying to get brand awareness out there that, hey, I'm somebody that draws, I'm somebody that's trying to create something that hopefully you'll enjoy, or do you have a commission, I can work on this sort of thing. The more I push for that, the more I find time lacking to do other things. And I've really had to work on that, because it affected my mental health for a long time, where I wasn't pursuing my hobbies. But they're just as important. They are just as viable as anything else. And I also have a lot of stuff around that I'll use that, you know, helps get some of my, my stress, you know, taken out. One of my favorite things, I'm not going to activate it because sometimes it can be weird as well with OBS, but they used to sell these, and I'm really happy I have one. I wanted to kind of buy another separate one. It's hooked up behind the camera, so I can't really pull it forward to show you guys, but it's a missile launcher. It looks like a G.I. Joe vehicle, and it's got 4 foam darts on it. It's got a little air compressor in it, and I control it via USB on my computer. And although an amazing update to it would be to have a camera mounted on it, it doesn't have that. I'm thinking about rectifying that situation though. But I'll use it to literally shoot, like I'll set up some artwork I'm not happy with over here on my other table, and I'll shoot it with missiles. And it's more of a stress release thing. I also have one of the few things I really got from Hallmark that I really enjoyed was this stress button. And I have yet to really figure out how I'm going to use it, but it's a Star Wars based one, and when you push it, so stress relieving. And it's got a couple, I think it randomizes. Yeah, so it's got like a couple of I think these are all Return of the Jedi sound effects. Yeah, I think there's even a few I haven't heard on here. Oh, the AT-AT walker. That is... I'm not sure what sound that is exactly. Anyway, I keep stuff like that around to kind of keep me on point and just make my environment and my area really work friendly. And I've had some people ask me before, oh, I'd love to see a tour of your studio and stuff. It would only ever be half at this point, since the other half is under constant construction and reorganization. I have a massive collection of just various things in the back that need to be organized. But the work area I have here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, technically 6 work areas just on this side of it. And it's in a basement that I built this whole thing from scratch. I designed all the space, the interaction, everything, and I can go into another video and show you guys that in a longer format. I do plan on actually starting to show that on my TikTok to a limited degree. 60-second video clips. It's going to be a lot of them. So maybe I won't annoy the hell out of people with that. Anyway, let's jump back into this. So, all right. So I got my glowing oranges here on top. And let's see here. Looking at this, I wanted to do something a little bit more, but let's go with this for now. Let's see what happens, and hopefully it will go good. Now I had this little bit back here, and I'm gonna, before I really edit this out, I'm gonna just reduce the fill on it. I'm already liking that quite a bit. So it's just, sometimes I keep a vector in there just as it is, and I just mess with the opacity to give it a little bit of a, you know, a little bit of an environmental flair back there. But all of my elements that I use are really similar on a lot of the things I carry through, because I'm trying to world build to give it this specific look. There are some brushes I have. Let me take a look here. But I have stored under. Oh, let's see here. Oh, why are you not working? Hold on. Oh, because it was saving. Hit save again. Alright. Sometimes... No, that's not going to work. I don't know why. Something I've noticed is if I use my stylus to try and select a text area, and I don't know why this happens, for some reason it doesn't always activate the keyboard, so I have to go to the mouse and then click with the mouse. I think part of it is because I have multiple input devices. So, and that shouldn't be an issue, right? It really shouldn't be. But I know that the system has to try and configure, okay, we're working on a Wacom tablet. So with that, then it's got, you know, the touch sensitive stuff and it's reading this. But at the exact same time, I have the mouse still connected. I try not to use the mouse too much, but I end up going back and forth between both. But I also have, for my left hand over here, and I can show a better example of this later. I have a controller box called Tourbox, and it's pretty handy. I've yet to set up all the macros on there. The primary thing I use it for is the dial brush, and on the fly I can reconfigure my brush size, eraser size, anything else like that, and it makes it a little bit easier than going up consistently to the menu and, you know, moving it over using any keyboard shortcuts. I tend to like, you know, the tactile touch of buttons and levers and that sort of thing to get things to go. So at any rate, we're gonna go here, and so these are some of my imported brushes I have. There are a lot of variants out there. You can usually find some free like this out there. And what I'm doing now is I've created a layer, and I'm just gonna start placing some small start points throughout here. And I can increase the size a little bit. That. Some of that has to do with the overall quality and size. Now those were blue, now I'm going to go in for some white. Give it a little bit more punch. And you know, there's people that draw on the iPad that I can't figure this out. Like, to me it's like really strange. They talk about let's try a different one there. I whenever I've seen people create on the iPad, I don't know why. There's a lockout in my brain for the iPad. I've tried. I can't even remember the software that's real popular that everyone uses. And it's not like I'm really not trying to be elitist about it. Number one, though, I don't own any iPads. I don't have anything like that. The few I've managed to work with, when I go to the Mac store or something like that, trying to get something done on my phone, I'll mess with their stuff and I'll go, oh, this is kind of cool. This would be nice to have. But at the same time, I'm also trying to not drop the habit of, carrying a sketchbook with me, which is something that, for me, there is a beauty and a rhythm and a record that exists when you are drawing and committing something to memory. It kind of happens in the digital realm for me. I can remember things. I remember how things were put, but there's something about hearing the draw, the graphite, or the pen nib, or the ink spatter on paper that I'm sorry, it just, for me, it doesn't really equivocate the same way in digital. Now, in digital, I end up finding that I have a better memory of course, how the vectors came together and what I went through to create something. So then you do enough things enough times and anything, you start to remember, well, how does this work? What does this look like? And all this other stuff. So, okay, we've got that. I'm just going to save this. I'm going to listen to my cats run around like they're crazy. And so I'm sort of liking the placement of this. I was going to resize these, but I started thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to leave them as they are. Now, I have just a few decisions to make on this. This piece is practically done. There's really not a lot more I'm planning on doing with this. The more I thought about it, I was like, I could try and make this way more busy, but this is really just environmental. So I'm going to create another layer here. And I do have some shortcuts for myself that I've made over time. And I'm going to switch to my mouse and get this right, as opposed to awkwardly sitting here trying to fumble with this thing. I am such a brush collector. I'm an incurable collector anyway of most things, but there's so many, like, I have multiple drives in this system that I have. I'm ever grateful. B Squared Computers are the guys that, Matt is the guy that put this together. He is a one-man show in putting machines together. And this is my dream machine. At some point in time, I'll end up, I'm actually going to make a placard at the end of my thing saying that because I am ever grateful for this thing. He loaded it with hard drives, massive ones, and I'm going to get more because of the video and the art content and all the other stuff. But I store things from brushes to music to movies to all this other stuff on my drives. I'm not a huge fan of iCloud, of the cloud. It's just other hard drives somewhere that I don't know where they are. They could be in China. They could be in another part of America. I don't know who's really seeing that stuff. And although they tell me it's secure, and I'm gonna, assume innocence and think that they are, I still don't like it. I'm even struggling right now with transferring files from my iPhone to my drives, which is one of the reasons why I end up relinquishing and not doing as many live drawings or anything else like that on my phone, because I use my phone like a secondary camera. Now I have a Nikon that I use as well too, but it's an older Nikon, older digital SLR, and I have to take out the memory card and do that. First world problems, but because time is of the essence, it makes it harder to figure out pipelines for how all this stuff works. I'll get there. It's not impossible. It just takes time. So, all right, shut up about that now. And I'm going to go in here and let's use that earlier color we were using. And that's the star field. So let me go ahead and name that. And then we're going to save that. And then what we're going to do here is go into this one. And let me see here. So we got that up there. Oh. It's so weird how this works. Okay. So here under this one, I've got a few clouds. These are patterns and things that I really enjoyed. A few of these, under this particular one in clouds, these are ones that I believe I got with Brushbox, but there are some other ones that I have yet to load that I just go into Photoshop and I'll create new shapes from them and import them. There's a whole tutorial. People far more knowledgeable than me. I've just followed some YouTube tutorials and been able to make those things that way. But what I end up doing then is just picking some shapes that I really enjoy and then coming back into my layer here. And I enlarge it. Now for this one, I'll draw out just a little bit more and So what I'm doing is just starting to kind of pepper it in down here on the bottom, and the randomizer on there will allow it to do what it needs to do. I'm just dropping in some shadows first, like this, and then I'm going to swap this out. Get this. This is something I normally try and do. I also end up reducing the opacity on the brush even before. I can drag it along like this. And a lot of this, like, is trial and error for me. It's very much like a feeling like sort of what Bob Ross does with his stuff. And I'm getting a little heavy-handed with it, and then I'll increase the size of the brush some. Because I want sort of a cloud-like environment. Swap it out. And it takes a long time for me to figure out like what I'm most comfortable with this stuff, like what really works and doesn't work. I've struggled a lot of times with trying to make artwork that I felt was hitting exactly where I wanted it to be. And okay, so that's okay for now. Hit save. And again, the reason I end up building on layers is like anybody that works in Photoshop, basically unlimited editing. And so I'm going to go ahead and drag the fill down just a bit to get it to where I'm liking it. Alright, that's looking good. Now I'm going to go in here, and I have, normally I'll take the time to do trees and stuff like that, you know. I like to design my own trees, but I have these specific trees that I use in a lot of my work. And so in here, I'll make another layer. And then this way I can kind of decide like how I'm going to layer these in there. And I usually sometimes just start with like a few that are, you know, just some random touches of tree down here. Still keeping the opacity down, so that way they overlap kind of nicely with each other. And reducing the size there. Scale is everything. So again, a lot of this is guesswork. I'll zoom in a little bit because the video is getting a little further away from you guys. But in this case, I'm using the top of the tree to kind of create a bramble brush. And again, I'm going to draw that back quite a bit, even after I do this. There is a wild love I have for trees in Missouri. Bizarre looking trees that just, they seem really weird and alien. And when I was a kid, I lived near Namnoster State Park. And I used to go for walks there whenever I had a lot on my mind, or I just, you know, different things I had to get through. And when I was in Boy Scouts, and I used to see trees all over the place. And I've been to places like the Philmont Scout Reservation, to the Ozarks, you name it. They're just different places that, you know, you see trees, and I would spend time sketching them. They weren't great sketches, but they were references, and I found some of them from way back, and they're, for me, they're beautiful. That's what I was drawing when I was 16, 18, 21, 27, whatever. And it's seeing how I always drifted back to these trees that they almost look pained, old, worn, and they're like old Hispanic men, you know, that are bent over, or even my buddy James would probably say the same thing about old Asian men, and that's why they're bent over all the time. It's all the thinking and the leaning and the gravity and all this, and I've always found that to be something really, you know, pretty intriguing. I didn't want to copy the CSS. I wanted to make a new layer. All right. Okay, so that's the trees down there. So now what I'm going to do is put a few more back behind it, but I'm going to go back to this color and this brush. And I'm going to use a different tree back here, back behind. Now these are actually going to be back here. Normally I take the time to go through and do a lot more stuff with it, but I'm just seeing if this works. I want the trees to have a little bit more punch, but that, I like that one right there, I didn't like. See that one? Okay, so my opacity was down. Let me bring that back up. All right. And what I'm doing is just going in and kind of cutting out the bottoms of the trees. And what I mean is, like, I'm going to place this here. And there'll be a few that are maybe a little darker or more in the distance. And you'll notice that I can still see the trunks on them, right? But what I'm doing then is going back in, reducing the size. And the reason it's not deleting is because I'm on the layer where the tree is. And some of these I'm just going to almost ghost them completely away. And so that's how I build a lot of the texture and everything in there. Another thing I do, and a lot of people don't notice this, I stopped doing this in some of our more recent ones, but I like noise in anything digital I create. I can't stand really, really smooth stuff. I love it when other people do it. There's one particular guy, I think his username is Mechazone, and dude, like, that guy is legit good. He's done work with Transformers and stuff like that. He's done freelance work for stuff having to do with robots, and he has a beautiful marker quality, and his toy creation is freaking just outlandishly good. But he in a lot of his artwork, there's this gorgeous, like, grittiness to the marker and ink work, and even when as refined as he can get with his stuff, it still looks like it's lived in, and I love that. I love that aesthetic. And, you know, it could be argued here that there's some definitely flat, you know, sort of aesthetic going for this. That's my big thing. But what I end up doing is on the background, I'll go up here into view, and then no, not view. What do I want? I know there's something here. See, it's been a while since I've done this. So, oh yeah. Okay, let me select all. So what I'm doing is putting that there. That is, oh, that looks kind of cool that way too, doesn't it? See, that's what, so sometimes I end up with some really happy accidents. Like, I like that lit up like that, but then when I remove that and it goes into the dark area, there is something actually pretty freaking gorgeous about that. It looks actually colder and a little bit, oh man, I'm about to have an issue with this. Like, even beyond my cat walking across my camera. Hi, Luna. How you doing? So the desk I have, in case you guys are wondering how this desk is where everything, the main media stuff is sitting, is a reconverted door that I didn't use from a bedroom upstairs. And it was the longest thing I could find, and the hole where the door handle was, that's my cable run for all my power. It just drops through there and underneath. And you done? And then this is a long calyx that I got from, I believe that's what it is. I don't remember half the names, from IKEA. It's mounted to the wall into the studs, and I leveled it to go across. And then next to it is another smaller box unit that's where Vector sleeps and sits, the robot. And then there's my old desk over here. This will all be in a different video. That is also connected to it, where my 13 by 19 scanner sits, and then it's got, that is on an extension that was added on to my desk that was given to me for my 16th birthday, my original art desk, which has been modified and updated to some degree to become a workspace that I could use. It's kind of a crazy setup, but it was something that it doesn't make sense to anybody else but me, and I can go over that in a different video. I'm digressing right now. I think it's because of this whole color thing. Now I'm like really upset. I'm like, God, because I see this and I like this, and I worked really hard to get that, but then I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh man, the beauty of that, like the darkness of that just is so cool. I don't know what to do. Right? All right, so wait, let me see something here. So if I reduce this, what happens here? Is there a happy medium I can find? Let's go 50% on this. That's already better. And it's not going into the complete flat field of that either, because that starts to get a little boring to me. There's no contrast. There's nothing, almost everything. Like, a big test for it is if you squint your eyes at any, I'm always squinting my eyes. That's not a racial joke. My eyes are literally that way. First Nation blood. And if you look at these things, you know, to me, there's a part where I'm like, well, the more I bring into it like that to lighten it up, you know, if I'm bringing it down just a little bit, Is it not showing enough contrast? If I take it completely out, they really seem to glow, which is the nature of contrast. If you have something white, it's going to look at its brightest if it's on a darker background. And that's how you get that pop, the dreaded pop that people will tell you if you work as a designer or an illustrator. Can you make something pop? There you go. There's your answer. Don't make it glow. Make it just really contrasty. And they're like, oh, it's totally popping against there. But they'll want... I had one time, one person that really wanted a design to pop, but it was like a light orange, and they wanted it on a white background. There was no way. I was trying to explain. I'm like, can we go with a deeper, richer, thicker PMS orange? Can we put a drop shadow? Can I do an outline? It took finally me demonstrating, look, let me do a thin 1 to 1.5 point outline around it. Offset it just a little bit underneath it. So in Illustrator, I would do the logo, and then take a copy of it, drop it onto a second layer, or just copy and paste it to the back on the same layer. I usually do separate layers, so I have true control and understand where all my elements are. Once I did that, I was able to offset it just a little bit, and they really liked it. And they were so worried, though, because in their mind, and this is something you have to contend with, which is one of the reasons why I'm an advocate for educating people on this sort of stuff, because they could kind of, as they put it, see white coming through the orange. They didn't understand that that was a solid orange color that existed, that would print completely onto the paper, and that it was solid in its own existence. And when you put black underneath it, unless you activated transparency, it wasn't going to be transparent. But the reason was because they had another designer some years prior. It didn't matter what they worked in. If they wanted a lighter purple, they just added more white, but then made it more transparent. So they had, and I finally witnessed this firsthand, these Photoshop documents that, and some Illustrator documents, and even a few InDesign ones, where everything was designed with transparency in mind. I'm talking layer upon layer. That is a nightmare trying to print stuff like that. I know that in today's digital age, where RGB is on my mind because I've been saying a lot about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. RGB coloring versus CMYK is a lot more easy and palatable for printers to be able to work with. I think there's conversion software for it and everything, and some just output. Like a lot of my mugs and stuff like that are outputted using RGB files. Damn it! And so, with that, that's a lot of what ends up being a challenge, is that you end up having to explain stuff like that to people, and why, and a good example of that too is I create all of my artwork in RGB, because the glows, the color variant, everything else like that seems much more vibrant, and I can output that whenever I create my art reproductions, and they look just like I see them on the screen. Sometimes a little more saturated because I'll use coated stock or certain papers, and you have to kind of contend with that sort of stuff happening. Gloss finishes, anything else like that will affect how your artwork looks, of course. But when you're dealing with a client and they ask you to do something, they have a particular picture in their mind. And sometimes I've also found that in today's world of multimedia, they will often also look at something and go, but I see it in my mind moving this way and that way. Yeah, you're seeing it that way. I'm creating a logo for you, not an animated GIF, not a short film, nothing like that. But it's trying to give people more. And I think the hardest part is because people will absolve themselves to this moving picture they have in their mind, this thing that they see and just what it is extremely hard for them to disassociate that. And it's a weird thing to think about. It really is. But that's, again, another video that we can go into with that. So I think, having looked at this now, I think I'm okay with this. Like, this is good. This is not bad. I'm liking it. It's simple. It works. There is something down here that I'm thinking, like down in this area, right down in here. I want to put something down there, but I'm really not sure what that is, because I'm kind of enjoying how this is. It's just, these shapes. Now, I'm saying that, and this is where things can get fun for me. Like, I will start to go in there now, since I'm 99% sure this is where I'm gonna stick with it. Now I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to go ahead and merge down the glowing orange. This is when I start to sweat. Because I'm doing this without saving, so I can always go back and revert. And yes, I know save a duplicate would normally be what I'd be doing right now. But I'm also trying to be less precious with what I have and running with a lot of these things. So now I'm going to just try messing with making these things a little bit less opaque. And what does that look like? They start to look a little ghost-like, don't they? You know, where they're not even there, which it was an idea and that's all it was. And I was like, all right, that's fine. What I can do though is come in here and get me what I want. I can come in here, and now that they're unified, take that one. I'm going to go ahead and resize this one a little bit. Just a bit, not much. And bring it back this way. Hit return and deselect. Okay, that gives it a bit more scale. I like that. And it still kept the overall feel I was looking for, so that I'm not getting a tangency. I'll move it over. And then this one's a little too close now. Now I'm starting to see where I'm like, okay, maybe I need to resize this one. So I use the square select a lot. I can also use the lasso tool to go around it, separate it out a little bit. So transform and scale, and I'll move this one. I'm not going to make it as small. I don't want to do that. Hit return, deselect. And I'm liking that. That's not bad at all. That is not bad at all. So what else can I do here? See, there's also a part of me too that's like, well, the front is a little bit too unified. So maybe, and this is where things are really going to get hairy. But I keep telling myself, I'm like, you know what? It's just messing around with it. Yes, this was my original idea. In case you're wondering, I have it locked so that I can just drag one corner. That's the default I have set on here to do this. And the wonderful thing in working with this, aside from the fact that I'm freaking out about sometimes if the video stops or not, is I can look up at this secondary monitor, which is directly ahead. And because it's shown in OBS, it's like basically a 50% reduced thing. And I am a huge fan of taking the time to step the hell back from your work and really take the time to look at what you're creating and see if it makes sense, to see if any of it really makes sense. And there's a reason for that. There truly is. So I'm liking this so far. It's working. It seems to be fitting together a little bit better in my mind as to what I was picturing. And I just wanted something that was a little off kilter, that starts to do the classical sort of spiral toward itself, but then it makes me wonder, is there something that should be living there in the center? Should there be some connection point? Is there too much of a tangency going across the top up here? You know, I like this curve here, but I don't like that, you know, so what is the natural zone of that? But I don't want to push it up too far, because I like that it's connecting the surface of the floating moon, the circle of that, overlapping the mist that's running by, and then touching the top, the spine of the mountain. So, you know, this is one where I'm going to go ahead and do the brave thing. It's saving! I can't go back. It's like creating an NFT and burning the original artwork, which I have mad respect for. So now the whole thing next is like, okay, what do I want to do? Is there something that I want to bring in? Is there something that I think would tie it all together to make these things much more, you know, connected? And so I'm going to try something where I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go ahead and do a new layer. And then, so this is going to be completely making this up. What I'm going to do is go down here, and because I want something that can help with scale, just to give an idea of what is going on. Okay, now, if you remember, you know, we have the fog here, and Let me see here. Okay, that's up above. So I'm going to drop this layer here so that it's kind of... Here's the white trees. I want them behind that. And I want them behind those trees there. This is why you label things. And I'm finding that out really quickly here. Woo! All right. So let me do that right now. Boring editing stuff. White tree text. I can't spell. Textures. And then those are the blue trees. Dark blue texture. Lay dark? Well, you know what? I'm just going to leave it. Trying to type with a stylus in the hand isn't fun. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and come back up here. And where's my eyedropper tool? Sample this black. Because something that's interesting that does happen. No, go away. I don't need to learn more about the eyedropper tool. Something that happens is whenever I transfer blacks over from Adobe Illustrator's vectors and bring them in, there is a beautiful thing that I found, and there's a work that I'm doing that if it comes out, it's going to look amazing, but it's going to suck because I know that I can't make it high contrast enough to really make it work. The black from Illustrator imports into Photoshop as a warm, rich, inky black. I am able to take the burn tool and create other shapes out of it by masking off areas, and there's like this warmer reddish orange black that isn't touched if I mask it off. And then the other areas, when I use the burn tool or I go and select a 100% black and push Jesus, I can't even think of the word, the RGB values over into it to make it completely black, it just looks sick. It looks amazing. But I've found that showing it off online doesn't really work as well. And it's very difficult to work with because I don't have the contrast settings on here. I have to really work in a dark room. I have to turn off all the lights, and I could never film to do something like that. I know there's a workaround for it, but part of it's lighting. With the glare that comes off this other studio light, it's almost impossible to do that. So, all right. So now I'm just going to create something, since I'm on this layer here. I'm going to go ahead and create something here. And I don't know what that is yet, so bear with me. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to... Here you're going to see some weird-ass stuff. Because I think it's weird. Because what I'm doing is I'm just coming in here and creating something that doesn't exist in Ardor yet. And it's all based on a character design in my head. So what I'm doing is just building this concept, right? And I know basically what I want it to look like. All right. And then let's see here. All right. Bear with me, this is going to get really weird. Because a lot of times I'm not even thinking about like where I'm going with things or whatever. I don't think about that stuff. I really don't. I just end up building parts on, thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to come back to this later, or I'll add more into it at a later point. So now I've got that general shape. Here's where things are going to get weird, because I can't, like, once I do this, I can't replicate this again. Or if I do, it's going to be really, really awkward looking. And then let's give it a little bit more. It's a creature based off of, similar to what Vina Patura is. She is one of my favorites in this world, as she is a creator of life and the opposite of death in so many ways. Alright, so there's that. Now let's add Okay, before I lose this, I'll go ahead and come in here. I'm going to do... Oh, don't deselect. This is when things get really wonky for me, and I'm like, ah! So I'm going to close this up and go back to my basic brush. I'm going to go ahead and put this in here like this. Okay, so that's her shape. So now I can deselect. Okay, I'm going to go back in and fill in more details on this. So this particular character does have a stave, a staff, a stave, a staff. Bit more of a hand there. And then long stave coming down. I'm not concerned with the overall size yet, but I do want to fill in some of this so that it makes more sense. I have always been obsessed with staves, staves, things like this. I think they're gorgeous and beautiful, and that any self-respecting fantasy character should have something like this. Oh, that's working very well. Okay. So now I'm going to finish adding in a few other things in here. So maybe there is... This is going to be a weird one. So maybe there's a little bit of flow forward here. There's this. Beginning of a foot here. I rarely ever draw the anatomy of some of these directly so people can see them. I want it to be like this sort of nightmarish, they're really not there sort of feel. Okay, so now that's cool. And looking at it, let me zoom out. And that really does bring it together quite a bit. Now it's a little centered for my taste, so while I still have it live, I'm just going to go ahead and move it over. And I know a lot of people would grab it. I don't like doing that. I just want to move it over just for the effect of having this character walking along there. And this is playing very much into one of the other things I thought about before, like, you know. Now, there are a few things on this that I'm going to try. This is a character that there's actually a triumvirate of. So there's 3. But as the story is still evolving and there's a lot more to it, there's things that I want to give away in the artwork that I publish and in the stuff I create, and then there's other things I just don't want to mess with, because I'm always worried that I'm like, I'm going to give away a little bit too much, and there's connections to some of this stuff. So sometimes I'll play with like, okay, now I've got that, so I'm going to go ahead and you know, like a good example of that would be, I'm going to go ahead and create another layer, and I'm going to figure out, like, since this is one of the primary character, or not primary characters, but it's aligned with some of the primary characters, there is a green glow to what they have in their eyes and in their bioluminescence. I'm going to go ahead and go here into this one, and I'm going to activate the outer glow, and this time the outer glow is going to be my favorite in the world, which is green. I'm going to go back in here. That's okay. I'm going to go back down here. I'm going to start filling in some details on this. Now, when you get up close, you can see, like, this is just all jacked up. But because I've already activated that up there and I have that there, I can come in here, because the bigger this prints, the more this is going to show up like, oh, hey, he really didn't think about that. So after I have the rough in here, I can come back in and I can still, you know, re-outline some stuff. And it looks like they're flipping people off here. I don't want that to be the case. So I'm going to create more fingers on here. And maybe a thumb coming off there and crossing over, like so. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually pick the same black that I had prior. Grab my eyedropper tool. I don't know why I'll lose that all the time. Make sure I've got the same black, and I'm going to go ahead and brush that in. is on the right layer. And hit save. And then, because I want, there to be a little, I'm going to reduce the size of this brush. That's ridiculous. I'm going to also do a few other little tidbits in here. So, happy with the head. It came out exactly like I was picturing it in my head. I'm going to do a few other things in here just to add some variety onto this. One of my buddies, Marty Hansen, God Beast, does these amazing toys that are based on his love of bugs. And I am very much an arachnophobe. I'm working to get over that sort of thing, but his toys are too cool to pass up. And his work has been a huge influence on my recent work, where I've been wanting to put more spindly, spiny, pointy things and make them more friendly, where they make sense, where I can see something and go, oh yeah, I really like this now, and I'm okay with this, And I didn't used to be that way. There was a lot of things that I would kind of shy away from because I always felt like, oh, that's a little bit too uncomfortable for me. But I figured that if I'm drawing something that's making me uncomfortable, then maybe that's better. All right, let's zoom out here. See, now I'm already liking the silhouette quite a bit better. The feet are bugging me, so I'm going to go back in here a little bit. And I don't mind that longer foot, but I think what I'm going to do is kind of go in here and add another toe. And then now the staff is looking a little bit too anemic to me, so I want to go back in here and really thicken that up. Again, not how most illustrators will work. I'm just telling you that now. So if you're watching this for a tutorial, I apologize for any hatred you're going to get for trying to do stuff like how I do it, because I'm not adhering to what a lot of other people will do, and these are creatures and things that I literally draw from I have no reference for this right now, none. There is reference. It's a lot of the things I dream about. I don't find it macabre. I've dreamt about stuff like this ever since I was a kid. Maybe that's from a steady diet of those old Hammer horror films or whatever. But I also base it on a lot of my fears that I have in life, and what it'd be like to see something like this. And this is quickly becoming very cricket-like, very arachnid-like. All right, so we're going to go back up here. We're going to save this, and then the next thing we're going to do is start adding a few bits of detail in here. Now, what I'm going to do is my whole thing is dropping in little bits of glow here and there. And a lot of it is just trying to, I don't like how that came out. Nope, don't like that one either. No, sir, I don't like that one. All right, that one's better. And then maybe there's some striation points on here. Nah, I don't like that. So this is where I'll sometimes come in, and because I really want some control over these shapes, like I know what I want right here. I want almost like this rib type shape here. I'm going to do a couple of them in a row so I can see exactly what this looks like. And there's another one here partially shrouded by the shroud on the back. I'll come in with my tool, highlight those up, and then save. More is less here. It really is. And let's see here. I'll put some lines there like that. And then maybe there's some coming off the neck. So what I've been trying to do is just build a an understanding of what this, like what the shape of the creature is, how it functions, what it does. and what the overall look of it is and why it is what it is. Now you'll notice that the arms go back up in here, so I've made a small mistake there. So I'm going to come back in, I'm going to sharpen this up, increase the hardness and the opacities at that, just fine. So I'm going to follow this shape up into here, cut directly into that. This one should really not be there, but it's just for a little bit of glow back behind it. I mean, it's going to be pretty much annihilated by that. So now I've got a shoulder joint that exists up here. And I'm going to go back with my brush tool or my pencil tool, whichever one. And maybe I'm adding just some of these sigil glows in here. Okay. And then this is all at a major distance, so we're getting that sort of feel on there. Now, because it looks a little bit too blown out from that distance, this is one of those things where, like, if you're looking at it, it just looks really blown out. So the effects glow is the standard that was on there last time. So what I want to do is probably bring down the size quite a bit to where it's a bit more succinct like that, right? And maybe bring in the spread just a little bit so it's a little bit more readable. Bring down the size. It's always so weird at this point to do this sort of stuff because it's really hard to tell, like, well, where do you want the size and the spread of this thing to be? You know, how much glow do you want on this? And you kind of have to find a happy medium, because what you see on the screen will definitely print out differently. You know, it's just, and he's not supposed to have a lot of detail. He's just supposed to be right there in the background with just enough detail to make sense. Okay, so now that's done. That's as much as I'm going to add to him. He's kind of just a little shadowy character in the background. So now I'm going to go ahead and merge these two together. So what I'm doing is just merging him as one unit. Got glow doesn't affect anymore, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now, what I'm going to do next is to make him seem like he's part of that background. The first thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to go ahead and make a duplicate of him. Okay? So this is a lot of times, like with these characters, what I'll end up doing just to create some different feels and effects, and adding another one back here and resizing him adds to the story, because now maybe he's back here a little bit ahead like that. Okay, so that's already seeming a little bit more cool. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of that one, because everything in threes is cool, as I have four things up in the foreground. And I'm going to put him back here. And so now I can make a couple of decisions here. I can decide to come in here and really reduce the fill on that guy, right? So he's just becoming like this shape in the background. Now, sometimes what I'll do is I'll really go in and edit the hell out of a lot of this stuff and really make some extra differences. But these are characters that are really supposed to be very similar to one another. So I'm just kind of messing with that. The one up here on top, I'm going to make him even smaller, so there's a little bit more of a feel of where he is in reference to the overall shape and size. Give him some distance here, so maybe he's on the same plane but a little bit up higher, and hit return, and that's good. That's actually not bad. All right, and then so much of this is just a hope and a prayer, and there's a part of me that wants to go ahead and create like another one to save over, but I'm okay. I'm handling it. It's fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the eraser tool, and this is one where it goes back to being little to no hardness, and keep the opacity at about 48%. And what I'm doing now is I'm on that guy in the background. I really want him to fade out a lot, so I'm going to go in and start taking away part of him from below, so he's really faded into the background. Next one up here, I'm going to do the same thing. But I can also start to push up the opacity of my brush, because I need it to be a bit more, you know, where he's really fading into the background. But there's a shape to his feet more. And I just kind of make some decisions based on that, on how much this other guy will be too. and maybe I'm making him even more faded out. And then the one up in the front, he's going to get quite a bit, but I keep saying he. That's not correct. So go in here. This one's going to be a little bit more exact because you can see some stuff. But I'm going to be really careful with what I'm doing in general here. Like, even though I had the feet, the only one you really see that in is over here on this one. And so I'm actually, there's sometimes where the advantage is to keep them a little bit more, he's going to look better in that scale. The danger with that is if you end up increasing it too much, you're just adding pixels to something that doesn't really have it, but you really want that sense of scale. Now that's what I'm talking about. Much better. Really enjoying that now. Now the story is coming together. I was a little bit more nervous about this, but this is essentially done. The next step would be for me to make some digital reproductions of it, placing them in Photoshop and these things. That's all super boring, but if you guys are interested in that, leave a comment below and I can certainly go down that path and show everything from how I do that to going to the output. I don't mind about that. The work is getting it done, and then if you want to try and do that sort of stuff, I mean, some people send it off to places like Cat Print or other things like that, or other third-party printers. I have the ability to do it here. It took a long time to find the right printer, and my Canon Pixma Pro 100 is a very good printer for that. So anyway, that's the extent of it. That's as far as I'm going to push this. I'm really happy with how it came out, and yeah. So about an hour into fixing this. It's crazy because like the initial ideas and stuff took their own time, but this is one of the reasons too. I'll end with this. This is one of the reasons why I champion people educating other people on how long it takes to do something, because people will go to a show and they'll see, oh, hey, that reproduction is $35, or that original is $300 or $1,000, or whatever the price point is you put on these things. Well, there's a reason for that. Because you don't, as the purchaser who comes in and just sees this sticker shock, okay, you don't realize how much work went into that. And we're not a car dealership. This isn't necessarily a mass-produced product. There are some people that do that, but there's not, as many that I know personally that do that. The majority of them create artwork, and they're spending time experimenting, researching, trying. They're doing whatever they can to make some really cool stuff happen, to tell stories like this, where you see it and your mind starts to fill with, well, what is this? What's going on here? What are these things? And I hope that in these videos I can kind of pull, the shroud back a little bit and really showcase what it takes. Everything I did was just through years of experimentation and research and watching and asking other artists how they do stuff, and then trying to develop something that I felt was, at least for the most part, uniquely my own. And all of my artwork currently is inspired by shadow puppetry and Soviet constructivism in posters and stuff like that. It's also inspired by my love of Samurai Jack and Primal and things that are stark and dark and heavy. The original version of Warhammer Online that was going to be released when Sega was still the publisher was supposed to be this heavy, just encumbering weight of a game. And you can still find the link for some of the demo play and examples out online on YouTube. That sort of stuff is, I always imagine what would it be like to be in a fantasy world that is that oppressive, that is so weighted down. Because, and this is really the first time I'm admitting a lot of this, Ardor is based around a lot of my own understanding of mental therapy, counseling, trauma, things like, that I've read about, like Stockholm Syndrome and everything else like that. Imagine an environment that is like that at the exact same time, it does not affect its own inhabitants in that way, because it would be alien to us. And that's sort of the idea that it's the outer theme that surrounds what Ardor is. It is a world that is separated from ours, but is uniquely reminiscent of ours because of how Ardor came into being, which is part of the story, which I'm not going to go into right now. But because of that, when you throw a human being into that element, it is suddenly somebody who is forced to deal with the realization, with the manifestation of the fears they've harbored, of trauma that is long deep-seated or forgotten or buried or patched over or supposedly maybe even worked through. But when that happens, I know firsthand, I've ended up like turning a lot of my artwork into therapeutic stuff. And when I get this out, it reminds me of things that I'll either dream about or whatever. I'm like, well, I'm not going to let it haunt me anymore. I'm going to revel in what it is and put it out there and just think about what it is, because this doesn't even come close to the bizarre stuff that I really see. When I see this, it doesn't look like flat graphic elements. I try and make something that's eye-pleasing, but what ends up happening is that in my mind, specifically when I dreamt about this, I could see these three beings in the background, and they looked a little different than this, a little more grotesque, but I was small, and the blades of grass were around me, and they were like brambles, and they were much taller. They were the size of trees, but you could see they looked like mightily just magnified brambles and grasses around me, and hovering above were these giant jet black rocks. This is my cat Radar. And they were glowing up on top, and it looked like they were on fire. Now, some of that may have been from the way the dark side looked in the Justice League movie. And but that's not the first time I've dreamt of that imagery. Like, lava freaks me out. Like, of all the things growing up, there's things in life that I'm like, oh, I never thought I'd be like still fearful of that. But like, I never played the lava game. We're like, oh, the floor is lava, I gotta jump from here. I never did that. I didn't like to jump when I was a kid. But that's a real thing. Like, what would that be like to see like this like just bioluminescent sort of like real radiating heat, like a floating island with lava coming from? Where the hell does the lava come from? Is it magical? What is it? But it was above me, and the only part in here I didn't illustrate was the lava dripping off the rocks, running down the center point and creating their stalagmite, or no, it'd be a stalactite. It'd be one of the two, the one that hangs from the ceiling. Don't jump in the window. Sorry, the cat. Radar. So it, and it's dripping down, and that's what's forming the undergrowths on there. And they looked like these long, dagger-like teeth, which remind me of like anglerfish and things like that. But they were almost crystalline and clear. And I think this was a much easier, more simplified version of it. I still want to revisit this. Again, this was more concept art and not anything that's necessarily going to end up directly in the publication of Ardor #1. But somebody did ask me the other day that whether or not this artwork would ever see the light of day in any other print aside from art reproductions. Like, am I going to collect it all? Yeah, because there's a lot that's out of circulation now. There's been some of the series that have sold out, some that I just don't make anymore, or some characters that were abandoned. But I do have plans, all willing, that there will be an Ardor art book that hopefully will go along with Ardor issue 1 at NakaCon this year in September. I know that's going to be a long tooth sell, because I'm basically crash landing people into a world that they don't really know a whole bunch about, and I'm really pushing an original IP on this. Hey, no, you can't. No, sir, come here. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to do, is block the screen with my cat's tail. That's what I really wanted to do. It's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon, man. What is wrong, sir? Oh, man. My cat's put up with so much bullshit. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope that you guys, for anyone that was watching this that wanted to know about Photoshop, I hope this was somewhat helpful, or at least somewhat entertaining, and maybe you learned something from it. I'll have this possibly available for purchase for, maybe I'll do like just 10 in the series, and then see what goes from there. It has been an interesting thing. I'm going to add this really quickly. With Etsy and with TikTok, I am getting the traffic in, but it is unique in that, like, because I don't necessarily do fan art, and I've always been back and forth on that. There's a few things on there that are. There's a Samurai Jack piece. There's my Tank Girl design. I don't really do stuff like that, so I strive for doing things that I really like. There's storylines and things I really want to get out there. When that happens, it kind of puts me in an interesting situation where it's harder to drive anyone toward it without explaining what the storylines are. Thankfully, because of TikTok, it started to help. People have started to get interested. I have my second video of Ardor #0 reviewing on there, where I'm just flipping through the pages and talking about what happens in that comic. That was a very early prototype version of what Ardor has become now. And although there's elements of it that will come over, I think it's only like 20 or 30% of it that comes over into it, but it is still an interesting thing to go back and look at and see the art style that I chose at that point in time. I was always and have always been involved with appreciation of the artwork of Bernie Wrightson, and he was an amazing fellow. And a lot of the artwork in that book is that sort of line, sort of almost not stippling, but like cross-hatching line alignment, parallel to each other for shadowing and all that stuff. And that's been really a huge thing that people have asked me about. Is the next book gonna follow that same aesthetic? No, not totally anyway. But yeah, I'll have more on that later. Thanks again for watching. Let me get finished with this so I can upload this opus after I edit it and put it together, and hopefully get some feedback from you guys on all of this. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video that I'll probably do tomorrow morning. Bye.